I'm going to do things a little bit sort of different today. I think I'll talk a little bit about sort of, give you a general idea of Middle East and Christian Bible. I'll personalize the story with my experience. And then I would like to allow enough time for questions where we can make this a bit more interactive. So I'm going to start a little bit farther than my own sort of story, to go back to my grandparents' story. My grandparents on both sides, the maternal and paternal, actually were Turkish, or more appropriate at the time, they were Ottomans. My grandfather's family, from my father's side, they were one of the oldest and most well-to-do landowner families in Turkey. In 1915, when, I'm sure you've all heard of the Armenian genocide. It's called the Armenian genocide because most of the people, number-wise, they were Armenians. However, it wasn't an Armenian genocide, it was a Christian genocide. The Ottomans, who, a little bit of inside story, used the Kurds as their proxy to do this Holocaust, or basically attacked all the Christians in all their territories. Now, my grandfather, on my father's side, was one of 12 children and a very large family in clan. When the attack happened for the Holocaust, he basically just dropped down and started at the beginning, and the killers were starting to massacre his whole family and brothers and sisters, and he only survived by playing dead under their bodies. He was 8 years old. After sitting under them for about 6 hours, he got the courage to get up, go to the town square, and of our whole clan, the only other survivor was his cousin, age 10. So an 8-year-old boy and a 10-year-old boy decided to run from Turkey to Lebanon, because Lebanon has always been the land of refuge, the safe haven for all persecuted minorities. So an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old ran during the night and hid during the day, survived by eating whatever was growing in the fields, and made it to Lebanon. I mean, as an aside, when I look at my own kids now, growing up in the bubble of the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where literally they want drivers to take them 2 blocks if they have to go. I mean, these stories are so ingrained in me because I've heard them all firsthand from my grandfather, who was there, and my other grandfather. But it's amazing how 1 or 2 generations can. So I mean, so just to finish with the grandparents' story, they arrived to Lebanon at age 8 and 10, penniless, no education, nothing. After all the all the good they had back in Turkey, but kudos to them. They picked themselves up and they started as day laborers. Then eventually, earned enough to start a construction company. They grew the construction company. Eventually, my father and my uncle took that construction company in the 50s. That's when the whole Gulf was blowing up with oil and construction boom and everything. So my father and uncle took that business to the Gulf, going from one country to the other as oil is being discovered and things were being built. And by the time it came to my generation, me and all my cousins graduated from the top universities in the US, Ivy League. We're all American Lebanese. We're probably more American than Lebanese at this point. And all is well, so to speak. But that speaks to the resilience of these Middle Eastern Christians. We have our presence in the Middle East has predated Christianity, predated Islam, predated, in Syria, the biggest tribe during the Islamic rise was called the Astaniyin, which occupied most of Syria, which was a Christian tribe. So that land is our land, and we need to do anything we can within our powers to make sure that during our lifetime, that area doesn't, the Middle East doesn't lose its Christians in the land of Christ, so to speak. So that's a bit of the history which will come in handy in the rest of what I'm talking about. So I grew up in Lebanon during the Civil War, where literally you see people shot around you day and night, friends getting blown up by car bombs, all that. So a little bit of a funny story. At age 15, 16, it was all militia rule, it was a gangland. I had an uncle who was very high up in the Christian militias, and I convinced him to give me a permit to carry a gun and get me a gun. And so at age 15, I was walking around with a gun. And when I was 17, I accidentally shot myself. So my father, who was, my poor mother, just hearing that call, I think it cost her a few years of her life. And then my father, who was in the Gulf at the time, flies over to Lebanon. They hid me in a seaside resort that we had a place in. And my dad came in and was like, you're not staying a day more in this country. You can pick your poison, France or the US, but you're not staying here. And I was very, very upset about that. I had a great life in Lebanon. Growing up in a country that's in this, intense civil war, I realized all the stories you hear here from Lebanon are doom and gloom. There is no newspaper article that ever comes out that says, a plane landed safely in JFK today. But it's the bad news that's said. But even in the height of the civil war in Lebanon, just to give you an idea about the Lebanese and the mentality, we knew that, there were certain hours, the shelling between and the difference between East Beirut and West Beirut is like not even a mile. We're talking about the very, very close thing. It started around 6 p.m. or so, and then it lasted to 7, max 7:30. So we'll wait for it, and it was like, 15, 16 years old. So we would wait for it, it will start. And we lived on a hill in Beirut, overlooking, and I could see, we were on the Christian side, and I could see sort of the cannon fire going in at the hill below us. And these guys don't readjust the aim after they fire, so they fire the next one. Every time you fire, the angle of the cannon goes up a little bit. So I see them starting to come closer to our building, and then the last one was like very close, so I ran down to the shelter, I hide. But again, they stop at 7:30. 7:30 you get up, you go into the shower, you get ready, you put your nicest clothes on, and then you go out party until 4 or 5 in the morning. So even during the war, it was an unbelievably special and fun place to grow up. And it teaches you things that it prepares you for life in a way that nothing else does. I even happened to be present in Lebanon when the Israelis invaded Beirut. We had escaped at the beginning of the invasion to the Christian side. We were still living in West Beirut at the time. And then, we thought everything was fine. We moved in, and then the whole thing exploded again, and we had to be evacuated at the back of some tanks of the army who were leaving West Beirut to East Beirut. So in one day, I was, I think, 14 at the time. All my life, for the first 14 years, got cut off, and now, even though it's a few blocks away, we're in a totally new environment. Back then, there were no telephones, back then they weren't working, there was no email or anything, so I couldn't even keep in touch with my friends who were mostly Muslim in West Beirut. Anyway, so having gone to the French scene in Lebanon, I was very, very adamant that I never want to see a French teacher again in my life. So I said, I'm going to the US. So I managed to get into Caltech. I do quite well. I ended up finishing at the top of my class. And in my junior year at Caltech, I got a grant from the Pentagon through NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab to conduct research on how you position tanks in a battlefield to optimize the chance of winning using a new mathematical technique I was developing. When I went to my advisor to do research, and he knows I'm from Lebanon, it's like, you just came from a war zone. Do you really want to spend the whole term looking at tanks and battlefield? I was like, well, he's like, why don't you do it instead of doing red tanks, blue tanks, green tanks, do it on stocks, bonds, and commodities. It's the same. The math is the same. So I was like, fine, but I had no idea what a stock was, what a commodity was, nothing. I was dead set on a PhD career, and I did it. The paper gets published at the university, and in my senior year, sort of spring of my senior year, I get a call from somebody saying, this is so-and-so from Salomon Brothers. We've read your paper, and we're very interested in inviting you for a visit to New York. I was like, I have no idea who these guys are, but free trip to New York sounds great. I've never been. So I ended up going, and one way or the other, they sort of made an offer that I couldn't refuse, and I thought, okay, I'll do this for a year or two. And here we are, I think, 20 plus years later, and I'm still hoping to go back and finish my PhD. So enough about sort of my background, family background. Let's talk a little bit about Middle Eastern Christians. From that background, you can see why I'm so passionate about that topic. Aside from that type of passion, I truly fundamentally believe that Christians in the Middle East moderate the whole Middle East. The tensions in the Middle East, I hate to criticize our own policies, but I think we have to be objective in what we've done and why there is anything. If we don't really understand why there is this animosity between parts of the Middle East and us. There is a book, the most amazing book about the role of oil, from the days Rockefeller discovered it to today, and how oil has played a major role in every decision that was ever taken since then. It's by Daniel Yergin, and it's called The Prize. It won the Pulitzer Prize. But essentially, if you think about it as a Middle Eastern, or as a Saudi citizen, or whatever, you see that, I mean, for me, the Saudis are essentially Taliban with money. Their practices, everything is Taliban, they just have a lot of money. And by our president holding hand with, that's Bush, or, I mean, all whether it's symbolic holding of hands, or we are supporting dictators, we are supporting people who are oppressing their people. So the anger, whatever anger you see in the Middle East about the US, is never intended towards the American people. It's directed towards the American government and its inconsistencies in how we conduct business. On the one hand, we fought wars to spread democracy. But when it comes to Saudi Arabia, it's okay that they outlaw Christianity and they don't allow anything. So there's a bit of hypocrisy there that we need to work on. Now I understand we have a national security interest and we have to account for that, and oil is a big part of it. But maybe we need to work in a way that works a little bit better than it is today. But the Middle East has been going through this boiling period for a while. It's all exploding today. I can talk for hours about how we got here, but in the interest of time, I won't. But look, the biggest dynamic you should know about the Middle East, which gets lost in translation, is that U.S., Israel, and all these things are a sideshow. The only show that counts in the Middle East is Sunni versus Shia. This is a battle that has gone on for 1,500 years and is likely to go on for another 1,000 years or so. I want to wipe Israel off the map rhetoric of the ex-Iranian president is based. Now, the mullahs of Iran they're not stupid. They're crooks, they're corrupt, they're criminals, but they're not stupid. And they know that the minute they do anything, the Iranian mullahs, the minute they do anything to really provoke the US, the response will be so harsh that they will all basically get decapitated. And these guys are all now rich, fat, and happy. They've stolen, everything from their country. They're all worth billions. And self-survival for them is the most important thing. None of those people believe what they tell their people to do. They're all just using everybody from all over the Middle East. And same in Lebanon. In Lebanon, we ended up with a corrupt political class that have essentially mortgaged the country and stole that money to the tune of $100 billion. So when I got really sort of committed to the cause of Christian Middle East, I've always cared about, always supported them, but from a distance. But when I took it on as a very strong activist approach was in 2015. We're getting ready to commemorate the 100-year anniversary of the Holocaust, when to the day almost, to the day, the same communities that got brutalized during the Ottoman massacres of Iraq, Syria, Eastern Turkey Christians were being massacred again at the hand of ISIS. So for me, that was sort of enough is enough moment. We need to do something to this. So I spent a lot of time and ended up coming up with a position paper that is very simple. The only, the current layout or sort of situation of Middle East Christians is as follows. You have roughly about a total of 14 million Middle Eastern Christians. You have 11 million of them in Egypt, the Copts. Now, that number is so big, it's a tiny percentage of the Egyptian population, but it's a big number. Unfortunately, we can't do anything to save these people, except lean very hard on Sisi, or whoever can come after him. Because Sisi is playing a dangerous game. On the one hand, he'll show up, supporting Christian churches here and there every now and then. But on the other hand, every weekend, some church gets bombed, people get killed. And I refuse to believe that in a police state like Egypt, anything happens without his knowledge. So I would push to make Egypt is the second biggest recipient of USA. I would push to make that aid contingent on the real protection of Egyptian Christians, not just sort of the empty words that you get. So that leaves us with about 3 million Christians. One stat for you guys. Since the first Gulf War, until today, the Christian population of Iraq has dropped by over 95%. The number in Syria, after what's been going on, is not that bad, but it's quite high as well. So let's call the 3 remaining million. There is 1 million that is between Iraq, Eastern Turkey, and Syria. that are constantly, will constantly be, they're surrounded by hostile, and they can be attacked at any moment. So how do we fix that problem? Well, not out of laziness, but I usually like to explore similar situation where people came up with the right answer before I try to, like to sort of go with what worked, so to speak. Well, we know of other people who were persecuted for generations and only found relative level of safety when they put together in a contiguously defensible area. That's the story of the Jewish people and the state of Israel. Middle Eastern Christians today, you have about 2 million in Lebanon, and then you have 1 million scattered in small villages, hundreds of kilometers apart from each other, between Syria and Iraq and Eastern Turkey. There is no way we can protect them in the villages that they're in. I mean, let's be realistic. So my idea was the following, that Lebanon started going down the hill as the percentage of Christian within the population has gone down the hill. At our independence, the Christian counted for 55%. Now we're down to about 35%. The reason for that is actually quite worrying in the sense that it doesn't bode well for the future. But the Christians are much more pro-West and much more inclined to emigrate to the US, to Europe, to places like this, to find a better life. They feel a lot closer to the West than the rest of the Lebanese population. But also Christians care very much about education and about bringing their kids with all the amenities and all the services that they need. We've actually did some studies on that, but the average rate of a Christian family in Lebanon is 1.4 kids. The average rate of a Sunni or a Shia family is closer to 5. So we have a demographic battle that we're losing in a big way, but it's only a matter of time. The reason, we actually, hired a firm to do this, but essentially the reason for this change, for this difference in birth rate, is that for the Christian, the most important thing is to have their children educated to the university level and above. So they think they can only afford that for 1 kid or 2 kids, they will stop at that. That's not the case with the Sunnis or the Shia. On a separate note, now we're working on creating a fund for Christians in Lebanon where for the second kid we pay 50% of the education, for the third we pay 40, this sort of a sliding scale to encourage them to have more children. So we have 1 million there and 2 million in Lebanon with the dwindling Christian population percentage and power that goes with it. So my idea was the following. The Israelis or the Jewish people had to fight to create a state for themselves. In our case, we don't have to because Lebanon already has the most empowered Christians in the area. The geography in Lebanon is very hostile for anybody, any invader. Lebanon is essentially a very narrow coastal strip on the Mediterranean that turns directly into a huge mountain. So Lebanon is really a mountain with a narrow coastline. The mountains are very difficult to attack, to do things like that. So my idea was the following, to basically make Lebanon as an option for all these Middle Eastern Christians that are leaving their country, but instead of leaving their country in the area, to come to Lebanon. We win in both ways. We win by giving them security, and we win by increasing the number of Christians in Lebanon. So central to sort of that plan is that Lebanon remains fully functional, somewhat functioning state. Unfortunately, that is not the case today. We've had the same politicians in power for the last 30 to 40 years. And these guys have raped and pillaged the country and put it in $100 billion debt. The country, I mean, 2 years ago, I wrote a paper. I happened to be chair of one of the largest, most respected Lebanese diaspora organization that includes roughly 1,000 plus members who are only in the financial field globally. We connect them to each other. We have a mandate to work in Lebanon. We give scholarships, but it's a very powerful organization. So I wrote a paper 2 years ago as chair of that organization that, look, we are heading into the abyss unless you do point A, point B, point C. We gave it to all the top three presidents, the president, the prime minister, the speaker of the parliament, and of course, nothing was done. So where Lebanon stands today is very simple. It's like a family who has a combined income of $50,000 a year, but has credit card bills of $700,000. That family can never survive unless somebody can forgive them of the $600,000 out of the $700,000, which leave them with $100,000 to pay, which is still a pretty tough act when your combined income is $50,000, but it's doable. For the last 3 months, Lebanon has been on a standstill. Protesters everywhere. There is no money in the country. Banks years ago got into a Ponzi scheme with the central bank where they basically took all the depositors' money and gave it to the central bank in exchange for very high interest rates for them that they ended up giving much smaller amount to their clients. As a result, over 80–90% of the bank's balance sheets are held in these Lebanese treasury bonds. Now, it was only a matter of time before Lebanon defaults on this because there is no money coming in. Everyone's stealing everything. So where we are today is that the country is going into a failed state very fast now. But it's going to be much worse than a failed state because it's going to be a failed state and a failed banking system, which means that all the Lebanese that have deposits in Lebanese banks, which is the majority of the population, are going to see all their money wiped out. So you're going to have people with no money. You're going to have a government that is bankrupt. So think of air traffic controllers, think of hospitals, think of schools, think of emergency services. It's all going to go. I think it's going to be one of the worst humanitarian sort of disasters we've ever seen, especially that Lebanon, as a country of 4 million plus, is hosting 2 million refugees. I mean, we talk a lot here about the immigrants from Mexico and so on, and that's like about 10–15 million in population of 300 plus million. I mean, the equivalent for Lebanon here is 150 million Mexican, countries. It's a huge thing. So just to finish on Lebanon, and I'll stop, I think, after that, is the path we are on today is, and I've spent a lot of time in DC in the last few months, meeting with people all the way from Pompeo to Mick Mulvaney to other senior advisors to the president, and giving them a way where we can achieve all our goals. I mean, this administration has told us what their goals in the Middle East are. They are safety and security of Israel, they are defeating Hezbollah in Iran, and they are protecting Jews and Christians. The plan that I came up with accomplishes all these three things with no financial commitment and no boots on the ground. It does it by increasing our diplomatic engagement, have a no-nonsense either ambassador or an envoy or something equipped with sanctioning power, Magnitsky Act or others, to be able to go in and clean house. We don't need the Lebanese permission to do that, but most of them will agree with it. Some might keep a distance so they don't accuse of whatever, but this is something completely within our realm. And if I may add, the war with Hezbollah in Lebanon is not separate from the war we're waging with Iran now. It's just a second front of the war. And I'm afraid that while keeping all our attention focused on Iran, we're going to let Lebanon slide, increase Hezbollah's power, and then leave our flank completely open for an attack on that side. So I wrote this 2 years ago, so it's nothing new, but in the scenario that I see happening in Lebanon, and is that within days, few weeks, Lebanon will become a failed state. When that happens, I believe that nature abhors vacuums. So whenever you have a vacuum, the most organized party on the ground rises to fill that vacuum. In the case of Egypt, when Mubarak was deposed, it wasn't the reformists that took over, it was the Muslim Brotherhood. In Lebanon, when the government collapses, the most organized party and the strongest party in Lebanon is Hezbollah. Hezbollah today is in the weakest position it's ever been in. I've been begging the administration to allow us to move in for a kill. I mean, the proverbial kill, through diplomatic, action. But they have a different view. They think that by taking Lebanon over, by breaking Lebanon, they will also break Hezbollah. Then they'll come back and put the pieces together. My problem with that is the following. One is breaking Lebanon will only embolden Hezbollah and make them stronger. Now they are a paper tiger and irrelevant. But the minute they take over the whole country, they're going to be much more relevant, and that's going to be a big boost for Iran as well. But guess what? If Hezbollah actually does that, countries like Turkey, where Erdogan has been a pretty bad actor, pro-ISIS actor, countries like Qatar, which funds a lot of ISIS movement, and some of the most extremist Wahhabists in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, will not sit by idly while Lebanon is taken over by Iran. They're going to start arming the ISIS cells in North Lebanon, which are devout ISIS cells. And then we're going to end up with a Syria situation, but a Syria situation that is compounded with a failed state and a failed banking system. So it'll be 100 times worse than Syria. And the solution for that is so simple. I mean, I wrote it in a plan where literally we can avoid all of this. Everyone in DC that has listened to my plan agrees with it, but within the same breath they tell me, yes, it's great, but it's not going to work out. I was like, why? Because impeachment and or this, and there is no oxygen in the room, and people won't concentrate, people don't understand. So I'm still trying, but so that's kind of, I mean, I feel like we always, as the U.S. government, we are playing sort of checkers against people playing three-dimensional chess. We have a horizon for our policies of 2 to 4 years, whereas they have 50 to 100 years. So we have this mismatch and we're going to have to get over it. But in that scenario, and this is the last thing before I stop, if ISIS actually gets empowered in Lebanon, north of Lebanon, that is the area where we have some of the highest concentration of Christians. And we all know what happens to Christians when ISIS takes over. So I fear that there'll be a lot of killing at that time, but also whichever Christian will manage to escape will run towards Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is the lesser of the two evils. Hezbollah doesn't kill Christians, ISIS kills Christians. So we'll end up pretty much extracting defeat from the jaws of victory, and all at the cost of a higher diplomatic engagement. That's all we're asking for. We need an envoy or an ambassador equipped with Magnitsky Act or similar sanction power to make things better. I'll stop at this point and take any questions that you guys might have.
guess I should maybe start it off by, how much of a presence does ISIS have in Lebanon? And where are they located? Would they be in like the Bekaa Valley on the other side of the mountains, or? Because I just haven't really seen a lot of documentation or briefings on ISIS, like ISIS camps or an ISIS presence in Lebanon.
Yeah. Actually, 10 years ago, the Lebanese army had a huge fight with ISIS cells in North Lebanon. They tend to be in the part of North Lebanon that is closer to Syria and the Bekaa Valley. Amazingly enough, and the army won that battle, by the way, and imprisoned many of them. Amazingly enough, in the middle of the whole turmoil happening in Lebanon today, and literally, I don't know if you guys know, but the country is exploding as we speak. People attacking banks, attacking central bank, burning tires, closing the road. I mean, the rage of people is unbelievable. All their money that they worked their whole life to save is gone. They can't access it. The banks will give them at most $100 a week or $200 a week. So people, it's a powder keg they want to go. But these ISIS cells, I mean, and again, just to go back a little bit in history, and this is where I think very highly of the State Department and the professionals we have in the State Department. But you take somebody from Nebraska or Kansas who's very bright, who went to Harvard and went to the Kennedy School and now is at State. They probably read 2, 3, 4 books on Lebanon. When it comes to places like Lebanon, we have family feuds that predate the creation of the US. There is no way you're going to understand all the dynamics within the dynamics within that unless you can see it, drink it with the mother's milk. It's not something you learn in a book. And some of these are, so as part of this is a little story. When the Ottomans lost and the Allies took over the Ottoman Empire, they divided it arbitrarily amongst themselves. So France took Syria and Lebanon, England took Palestine now and Iraq and Kuwait. Italy took Libya and some other places, and they drew artificial borders. I mean, at the time France took Lebanon, it was what we call now small Lebanon, but they wanted to make it bigger. So they took pieces of Syria and amended it to Lebanon. Now, in 1920, when they were doing this, they went to the Maronite Patriarch, and the Maronites are the largest Christian community in Lebanon. And they told them they want to add a province in Syria that has 500,000 Christians. So he's like, what kind of Christian? Well, they're Orthodox Christian. He's like, no. He was afraid that bringing in 500,000 Orthodox Christians would dilute the power of the Maronite majority. So they came back instead and added a province with 500,000 Sunnis. And these Sunnis are now the ISIS people. They are very militant. They are, and I go back to what I said earlier. The real battle you have to watch out for in the Middle East is the Sunni-Shia battle. And we tend to, obviously the regime in Iran is despicable, it's criminal, and needs to go. But one way you can tell about civilization, about a country, is by what they've done in the past, who their people are, what they have achieved. If you look at Lebanon, even a tiny country like Lebanon, we have 4 million Lebanese in Lebanon, we have 15 plus million outside. We've had Nobel laureates, we've had scientists, we've had writers, we've had, we made a huge contribution over the years to the arts, to the sciences, to everything. You look at Iran, and so Shia within Islam are actually a minority, and they have this minority complex where people are trying to kill them. So a lot of the posturing that we see here is not intended for us, it's intended for the Saudis. It reminds me a little bit of Saddam, who was, aggrandizing himself, saying he has all these weapons and this and that, and until the last minute he kept saying it when he didn't have anything. But if he had said he doesn't have anything, he would have left himself open for an attack from all the neighbors. So, sometimes they get caught in these things. But trust me, Iran is ruled by fat, corrupt mullahs who are politicians, and the last thing they want to do is cause their own demise. So they'll talk, they'll do this, they'll do that, but there's nothing that come out of it. But the Iranian people are very much like us. I mean, I don't know if you know any Iranians or American Iranians now, but they're all modern, they're civilized. Their country is hijacked. That's the best way to say it. And you can see from the protests in Iran the last few days, who would have thought 10 days ago that this is possible? You have Iranians in Iran shouting, not death to America, shouting death to the Ayatollah. And there is an avenue in Iran, a major artery, where the government had painted on the ground an American flag and an Israeli flag. So in this mass protest that's been happening, the Iranians refused to step on the part where the flags were. You can see it in a video, where they all sort of went around the flag, squeezing themselves to pass, not to step on the flag. Everybody in the Middle East wants to be American, wants to be in America. The people of the Middle East, they don't hate us for what we are, they want to be us. But their government are all corrupt and oppressive and have done all of this. So the ISIS, maybe you haven't heard about it recently because 10 years ago there was a major battle there, but just 3 years ago we also fought hard against ISIS. We're trying to invade Lebanon from Syria. So the Sunnis in general tend to be, I know there are friends because they have the oil now, but they tend to be much, much more extremist than the Shia. Whereas Saudi Arabia doesn't allow women to show their face and to drive, and they have to travel with a male member. Saudi Arabia is Taliban with money. Exactly same behavior, same everything. Iran have women who are in government, members of parliament, ministers, doctors, there's no segregation. It's a great country that is hijacked by this regime. And I think when history gets written in 500 years, this can be a footnote in history. That, okay, for 50 years, they went through this, but if you look at the history before and after, there's nothing to fear. But it's just these mullahs now that have created all of this.
So Israel obviously has a major interest in this. So if you have a collapsing situation on its northern frontier, what does it do?
Very good question. I have friends who are Jewish and Israelis.
Mark, could you repeat the question so people in the back?
Yeah, sorry. How the chaos in Lebanon will affect Israel. So I was saying that I have many friends who are Jewish and some are Israelis. And I've spoken to very senior Israeli members, and their answer to me was very clear that they are completely against Lebanon descending into a failed state. They think that would be very bad for Israel. But in a candid moment, they also admitted to me that yes, you know what, it would be in the interest of Israel if war breaks out between Sunni and Shia in the Middle East. However, we want that war to happen closer to Iraq, Eastern Syria, Western Syria, Turkey, these places. We don't want it to happen on our border. So even the Israelis, look, this fallacy of breaking Lebanon to break Hezbollah, aside from the fact that it will achieve the opposite result. But even if it works, when was the last time we as the US were successful in taking the pieces and putting them back together? In Libya, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Vietnam. I mean, once the genie is out of the bottle, there is no putting it back in. And this constant thinking that, we can engineer all these things, it's never worked. And it's not going to work this time. There are so many complexities when dealing with Middle Eastern countries that, it just won't work.
I'm not clear on exactly what it is you think we should be doing, what the US should be doing.
Okay, I didn't want to get into it, it was a bit involved, but I'll give you kind of the headlines. Right now, Lebanon, thanks. Right now, so we need Lebanon as a strong country to save Middle Eastern Christians, because the Lebanese Christians are basically the banner holder of Christianity. Right now, for the last few years, the US has had a max pressure campaign on Lebanon and on Iran. That max pressure campaign has really hurt Hezbollah and Iran, with some collateral damage to overall Iran, and then the Lebanese people. But the problems of Lebanon are not caused by the US. The problems in Lebanon are caused by the fact that for the last 30 years, we've had the same people in power. It's sort of a kleptocracy made up of Sunni, of Shia, of Christians, of all these people. Literally, same people. I mean, if I give you, I left Lebanon in '87. If I give you a newspaper from then with the headline, with the names of people sort of, going back, and I give you a newspaper from yesterday or today, you won't tell which one is which if I black out the day. It's the same name, being the same argument. So what the street in Lebanon, what this revolt that is happening in Lebanon, what they're demanding is that all of them go. I mean, it was such a heartwarming and scary moment for me when I went to Lebanon, because for the first time in the history of Lebanon, we saw Lebanese of all social strata and all religions and all sects coming together saying, we're all Lebanese, we don't want to be divided with all these artificial sort of divides, and we want a country where we're not in a perpetual war, as Allah wants us to be. We are not, it's not a country where, every son or brother or person needs to leave the country to obtain a job somewhere else. A country where we can live in peace, we can be friends with our neighbors, where we have good schools to educate our children. I mean, basically what all of us need. That's what they want. What's preventing that from happening are two things. One is the corrupt political class, and two is the fact that we're $100 billion in debt, and unless we come up with $30 billion in the next, few days or weeks, the whole thing will blow up. So in my plan, what I propose is that, look, we've had this long running fight against Hezbollah for a while. I mean, one of the sort of analogies I use with our policy in Lebanon is that, if you think of it in military speak, let's say, a private in the army has only one goal: see the enemy, shoot the enemy. The general in an army has a much broader goal. The general has to look at the whole battlefield, not individual soldiers from the enemy. They have to see where their forces are making break in one defensive line or the other. They have to be nimble in, diverting battalions or divisions from there to explore that thing a bit further. And that's where we are now with Hezbollah. We're acting like privates. We won that war. Hezbollah today is the weakest it's ever been in. We need to move in and finish it at this point. And the way we finish it, I've always maintained that you cannot eliminate Hezbollah by fighting them on the ground. history is littered with stories of invading armies that were able to conquer a territory, but not hold it against an indigenous population that didn't want them to hold it. And this is when you fight Hezbollah, whether Israel, the US never fought Hezbollah, but Hezbollah is at their max status and power when they are fighting Israel. So I've been warning all my Israeli friends, don't take the bait. Don't get into a fight with Hezbollah because you just make them stronger at this point. Now, the reason I say that is the weakest point is threefold. Is one that they lost more fighters in Syria than they did in all of their wars combined in Lebanon. Their base, the Shia base of Hezbollah, is revolting on them. They're basically livid. They say, okay, we understand losing our sons, our brothers and fathers in a war to liberate our country. But why are we losing them in somebody else's war? Syria is not our war. Why did we lose them? Now, what's making this even more vocal is that Iran and Hezbollah, for the last 40 years, have controlled the Shia population of Lebanon through social services. Iran is very smart. They didn't start by creating Hezbollah. They started by creating hospitals, by creating a Shia social security system, by an employment system, all these things. And all that money was coming from Iran. When the Israeli invasion happened in '82, it was very easy for Iran to militarize part of that Shia population that turned into Hezbollah. Now, with the sanction on Iran, the money that goes into all these social services has essentially stopped. With the sanction on Hezbollah, their ability to pay their own fighters is in jeopardy. I mean, they pay 1 month, they don't pay the other one. So taking all these three combined, what the Shia population, I mean, this is the most important point because other populations were always against Hezbollah, but the Shia population of Lebanon saying, okay, well, we have this Hezbollah that is killed so many of our sons and brothers and fathers in this unjust war. We're not getting anything in return from social services and whatever. And it's causing sanctions on the whole Shia community where anybody who has any link to Hezbollah and links are, you know, I mean, if you give to a charity and then somebody else has to happen to give to Hezbollah, gives to the charity, then you're linked to Hezbollah. Mm-hmm. So there is this sort of Damocles sword over every Shia in Lebanon and overseas that they can be labeled as Hezbollah collaborators. Banks are not accepting the deposits. So the plan that I suggest is the following. If we appoint a special envoy, and so before that, what we agree on is that the way to save Lebanon and to kill Hezbollah is by cutting them off at the knees and getting rid of the whole corrupt political class in Lebanon that is Hezbollah cronies. The way I think that can be done is if you have a special envoy equipped with the Magnitsky Act. The Magnitsky Act is a US sanction program that has two triggers, human rights violation and corruption. And the US doesn't need standing in pursuing these things. So the US can essentially, you know, through an ambassador and envoy, go to Lebanon and talk to all the top corrupt politicians. And I guarantee you, so the options will be as follows. One, we're going to slap you with global Magnitsky, which means that we confiscate every cent that you have outside the country, where all that money is anyway. And then we put a travel ban on you and your family. Option number two, you voluntarily agree to leave government. You voluntarily agree to give back at least half of what you stole. You voluntarily agree to cooperate with us on unearthing other people's fraud. In exchange for that, you get amnesty. Now, I hate the fact that they're getting amnesty and they're only giving 50% back. But the reason I structure it this way is that in order to get things to happen in time, you have to give them something to live for. if you take away everything from them, they have no reason to cooperate with you. I guarantee you that when the corrupt Hezbollah cronies in power, you give them those two choices, they're going to rush to door number 2. And if they don't, you make example of one of them, and then the rest will rush into door number 2. So in one action, we would be removing the whole corrupt class that we've had for the last 30, 40 years, and getting $20, $30 million from the clawbacks of money that they stole. We float the government, we get it to a point where it can ask for IMF help and World Bank help and everything. We get, we appoint technocratic government that has essentially 2 functions only. One is to organize the flowing back of the money and reaching out for the IMF and the World Bank for help. And 2, writing a new electoral law that is not based on Hezbollah's needs or Iran's needs or anybody else's needs. An electoral law that essentially guarantees that every Lebanese is represented in his or her parliament and the reviews are heard. Once that parliament once the new law is done, you conduct parliamentary elections with international supervision. Once the new parliament is seated, as per the constitution and the customs of Lebanon, the parliament elects the president, not the people, which is, by the way, how it was supposed to work in the US. But it changed over time. And then the president basically appoints a prime minister who, in consultation with the parliament, prime minister goes and picks his working team, then goes to the parliament for a vote of confidence. So in a very short period, we will be getting rid of the corrupt class, getting the money to avoid the failed state situation and the complete blowout, creating a safer environment for the US and Israel and all our friends in the region, and putting Lebanon on a path where not only it avoids the abyss, but it survives and hopefully thrives, and be a good friend for the West, for the US, and a very good neighbor to Israel. And having Lebanon be in that position is what will allow us to use Lebanon as a safe haven for these other million Lebanese, Middle Eastern Christians. Because if Lebanon goes under and Christianity in Lebanon is being attacked, forget housing any other ones. I mean, they're all run, including the Lebanese, they will run. Yeah. But part of saving Middle Eastern Christians is to make sure that the home they will come into is stable. And the home, and the way to stabilize that home, the only way, I mean, look, we always complain that terrorists have asymmetrical weapons. But guess what? We have our own asymmetrical weapons. Sanctions are our asymmetrical weapon. And I guarantee you, I don't think we'll ever need to actually use sanctions in Lebanon. I think the threat of sanctions alone, because they know what it is, we've used it, so far as the US, we've used those sanctions vertically on the Shia community and Hezbollah. We've sanctioned everybody in that vertical. What I'm proposing is that instead of just sanctioning the vertical, let's make it horizontal, because you're concentrating on Hezbollah, but not on all the cronies in government that are much more corrupt than them. I mean, truth be told, Hezbollah actually is the least corrupt party in Lebanon. They used to get all their money from Iran, they didn't need to steal or do anything. Now they turn into drug dealers because there's no more money, but historically, they're much cleaner than the other ones.
Doesn't that?
We ask your question, please. We have time for one more question. We do have another obligation, so please ask your question, and we have time for one more, please.
Doesn't that essentially break the government? I mean, then you need a whole new constitution and everything else?
The constitution is completely fine. It's the government. I mean, basically, we've been stuck with the same actors changing seats here and there for the last 40 years. And these are the guys that basically raped and pillaged the country and brought it to the edge of bankruptcy. You get rid of them and you get a fresh crew of technocrats who are not associated with any party. And look, I mean, not Lebanese bias, but Lebanese in the diaspora are some of the most successful diaspora members. You know, the number of billionaires we have, the number of Nobel laureates that we have, the number of poets, the number far exceeds our 4 million people present in that tiny strip of land that's, you know, the Mediterranean. We are much more of a diaspora nation than we are we're not limited by that geographical area where we are. So I have big faith in the Lebanese that they'll find a way to get out of that if we just free them from the grips of Hezbollah and corrupt politicians.
One more question?
Does the U.S. have an effective and influential ambassador in Lebanon? You praise the Foreign Service in the State Department.
We'll just put it now and be done with it. So I'll give you a quick story. The ambassador that is in Lebanon, whose term has expired, and a new one, she's a caretaker ambassador now, and a new one has been appointed, but probably not confirmed until after the election. So as I ratcheted up my campaign against Hezbollah and Iran and everything, before Christmas I got some threats from Hezbollah against me personally and my family. I'm not without my means in Lebanon, so I fought them back in Lebanon, and it turned out that they had a correspondence between me and the State Department talking about some of these issues. And guess where they got that leaked copy from? The embassy in Lebanon.
Whoa.
I was livid in my meeting with Pompeo. I was, you know. So, I mean, look, the Lebanese are very devious, can be very devious, and we as Americans can be very trusting and to the level of what they consider naive. But, you know, we think the best of people, they think the worst of people. Our envoys, our ambassadors, tend to get taken by some of the charm that some of these corrupt politicians sort of present. So the ambassador, Elizabeth Richard, is an Obama holdover, while our policy in the US has been to never negotiate with terrorists. She privately was advocating direct dialogue with Hezbollah in complete, you know, opposition to US stated policy. And they're clueless. I mean, the embassy in Lebanon issued a statement that the protesters, urging the protesters to work with the Lebanese government to come up with a solution. I'm like, you're missing the whole point. The protesters are protesting the whole government. They want them out. They don't want to negotiate with them. They want them out. But that's how tone deaf we can be sometimes in these sort of, you know, hot spots with such intricate histories and you know, conflict within conflict within conflict. So.
Thank you very much.